Hi everyone, my name is Allie Dubé. I teach first grade for Baltimore County Public Schools, and I am here to talk to you about flipping the elementary classroom and to give you some ideas for doing an in-class flip with your elementary learners. This is usually a presentation that I do in person at conferences or workshops, but I decided to screencast bits and pieces of it so that I can put it on this website for you to have as a resource, or if you want to share it with your colleagues or go back to it in the future, it'll be there for you. So let's get started. I don't know if disclosure is the right word, but I just like to start off by saying that this is not going to be a flipped learning 101, the end all be all for how to flip your classroom. I just wanted to share with you my ideas and what's worked for me, and to um, hope that you can take some of those ideas and use them in your classroom. It won't work for everyone, but I'm just here to share with you what I've tried and what has worked for me. If you're not familiar with a flipped classroom, then this picture will help you. On the left, you see a picture of the traditional classroom, and that's what most of us are used to seeing. It's when you teach a lecture at school to all of your students, and then the homework that you give that night is practice based on the lecture that you did at school. So with a flipped classroom, it's actually switched, and the lecture is done at home and the practice is done at school. So you do a lecture at home by a screencast or video or some kind of digital delivery of the lecture, and your students use their devices at home to watch it or listen to it. And then that way they come prepared the next day. They've seen the lecture, they've heard it, and they're ready when they get to school to start practicing that skill that you worked on. So I liked this idea, but I knew that it just wasn't going to be effective because of the homework aspect in first grade. It's really difficult to assign any homework, let alone homework that has to do with logging onto the computer, and you really need a lot of parent involvement, and it just wasn't conducive to my classroom. So I looked into the idea of an in-class flip, and it has the same idea, whereas you are delivering the lecture digitally rather than in person, and you're taking out that teach part and providing that digitally, and then having more class time to practice. However, the lecture piece is not done at home. You just fit it somewhere else in your school day. And so I tried this in my classroom. I'm here to give you some ideas of what I've done and how it's worked for me. So I decided to do the in-class flip rather than a regular flipped classroom. The benefits of flipping a classroom, I'd say that the biggest thing is that you have a lot more class time, a lot more practice time, and more time to meet with your small groups, meet with individual students, personalize the learning, differentiate for each student and each group that you have. It just allows a lot more time for that. So you spend a lot less time in front of the students lecturing, and most of your time in small groups with students collaborating, students practicing, and you are there to meet with them and kind of just facilitate the learning that's happening. So a lot of my class time now is spent in small groups, which is really great, especially in first grade. We have a lot to differentiate, so it really is the biggest benefit, just having more time in that small group setting. So there's 3 different ways that I have done in-class flips in my classroom. I'm going to kind of preview these ways now, and then once I get to the actual examples of lessons that I've done, broken up into subjects, I will include those links in different parts of this website. So I'm just going to give you a preview now of these 3 ways that I've done an in-class flip. I have flipped directions and modeling, and I'll go into that in a second. I have flipped using my morning work block. In the morning, I have a 30-minute block for morning work, and I've really utilized that time to do an in-class flip. And I've done an in-class flip using stations. I actually do that a lot, and I'll go further into that and give you a couple of examples of stations that I do in phonics and math in a little bit. So when I first heard of this idea of flipping a lesson, I immediately thought of the time I spend, and I'm sure I know all teachers spend a lot of their time giving directions for an activity, modeling how to do an activity, repeating directions for an activity, modeling again, because for the students who didn't listen or missed it or forgot, I realized that I could just record myself giving these directions and record myself modeling the activity and then provide the link to the video to my students to watch on their own. Since I'm at a one-to-one school, it makes it very easy to do that. So I decided to try this out. And so for this activity, it was a phonics activity where my students were making a phonics lesson on Wixie for kindergartners to see. And so I screencasted myself giving the directions for the activity, and I was also modeling what they were going to be doing on Wixie. And I screencasted the whole thing. I talked through it. I know it's on silent now, so you can't hear it, but I was talking, so the students were listening. When I gave them the video link, they went to the video, they listened to what I was saying for the directions, they watched me modeling the activity on Wixie, and then they had that video to reference back to if they ever forgot what they were supposed to do or missed part of the directions. I didn't have to repeat myself. They could just go back to the video and watch it. So just something simple like this. It's not flipping a whole lesson. It's just flipping maybe 10 minutes of your day, but that's an extra 10 minutes you can spend doing something more productive than repeating directions over and over. So it just saves you a little time and a headache if you are tired of repeating yourself. If you're interested in doing stations, there's a great video, and actually I included this video on the website. I think it might be under the About section of the website. The teacher who made this video does a great job in setting up her stations to include a flipped learning station within those stations that she sets up. It's one of the first videos that I saw when I was researching the in-class flipped idea. It seems like it would work really well for this option, at least, would work really well for older students or for teachers who are departmentalized and teach more than just one class. It's really something great to check out if you're interested in trying stations out in your classroom. For me, since I have my one class all day and I really have a solid block in the morning for morning work, this is how I set up my stations, and I will show you a couple examples of actual lessons that I've done that are set up this way. But in the morning, for that morning work part, that's where I deliver the flipped lecture. And then once I get to the actual lesson block, I immediately go into stations. And I usually have three practice activities, and then a teacher station, which is where I would sit and I would really differentiate based on the groups that I was meeting with. One of those practice activities is usually a device or tech station where students would be doing Wixie or Flipchart or a video or some kind of practice on their device. But I will go much further into this in a little bit and give you some examples of how I've done these stations. Let's go further into morning work because I've brought that up a couple times. In my classroom, I have 30 minutes in the morning when the students are first coming in, and that's our morning work time. And I've really started to use this time wiser and use it to incorporate that in-class flipped idea. So I now use my morning work time to either activate prior knowledge, deliver a lecture, whether it's through a video or screencast. I have my students reviewing previous skills to get them ready for the lesson that day. Or if you teach a Baltimore County reading lesson and there's a shared reading experience part that you can incorporate as a video and share that as morning work, that you can do that too. So let me give you a couple of examples of what my students would do for morning work each day. We have Brain Pop. We have a subscription to Brain Pop in Baltimore County, which is great because we use it every day, almost every day. So one option is that you can assign a Brain Pop for a skill that you're working on that day for the students to watch in the morning right as they come in to prepare them for the lesson that you'll be doing that day. So in this case, you see students watching a Brain Pop on biographies. This was a reading lesson that we were going to be doing where the students would be introduced to biographies. They had never learned about biographies before, so instead of watching this video as a whole group together on the carpet, I assigned it as morning work, and the students watched it on their own, and they recorded 2 things that they learned about biographies from the video, and then they just wrote a little piece about who they would like to read a biography about. So it really saved me, 5 to 10 minutes that I would have spent doing this in whole group, and I incorporated that in my morning work block so to prepare them for the lesson that we would be doing and reading that day. Another option, since my students are one-to-one, I can now just assign them flip charts that I would have used in whole group in the past. I can now just assign it to their devices. They can pull it up and work through the flip chart rather than me doing it as a class in whole group. So this was an example from a math lesson. We were doing 3D shapes and identifying the faces of a 3D shape. I took one of my flip charts from the past that I would have used in whole group. I recorded my voice on each page, reading the words on the page just in case for those students who weren't able to read independently quite yet. It makes it very independent for them. And then I just had them do a little half sheet of paper responding to a question that I would use to guide my small group that day. So this was a flip chart I would have used in whole group, and it would have taken me a good 15-20 minutes in whole group. The students were now able to do it on their own independently in the morning and gather the same information and come to the lesson that day prepared with what they needed to know. You can also assign a video as morning work. I do this a lot in phonics in the beginning of the week to introduce which skill we're working on for that week so that I don't have to do this in whole group once again. This was an example from phonics on the first day of the sounds that we were working on. It was the oi sound, O-I and O-Y. I took a video from Turtle Diary, I think it was, and I assigned it to the devices. The students watched the video. They learned about the sounds that O-I and O-Y make, and they learned about O-I going in the middle and O-Y going at the end of a word. And then I just had this little cut and paste activity for when they were finished to tell me if they learned what they needed to learn from that video. Kind of to use it as a pre-assessment for me going into the lesson. And then that way, once we got to the phonics lesson, I didn't have to spend the time to go over the sounds for the OI and the OY. They had already gotten that from the video. My favorite assignment for morning work is to make a screencast. I really enjoy making screencasts. They're very easy, they're so effective, and the students really enjoy them too. And in this case, I made a screencast for math to prepare my students for the math skill we were working on that day. I made this screencast using my Elmo. I recorded a video from my Elmo. I pulled my Elmo up, I put my worksheet underneath, I started my screencast, and I just started solving the problem. And I was talking while I was doing it. I know you can't hear it, but I was explaining what I was doing, and the students were able to listen to me explaining it as I'm working. And you can see the little boy in the middle picture. He was able to pull up my video my screencast video, watch how I solve the problem, listen to me explain how I'm solving the problem, so that he understands once we get to that lesson, these are the kinds of problems that they were going to be working on. So they already have kind of a basic understanding of how to solve it. So in this case, I assigned this screencast. They watched it. It was only maybe a minute long. Didn't take much time at all. And then they were assigned a Wixie project to practice what they just watched in the video. And in this Wixie, I think it was 2 or 3 pages. It just had the same type of math problem. They had to solve it using the pen tool, write an answer, and then that was it. It probably took them 5, maybe 10 minutes to do this Wixie. And this really serves as a pre-assessment for me to see how much they understood from watching the video, how much they were able to do coming into the math lesson. Wixie is great because I can pull up my teacher account and see the completed projects that the students did, and just use it at going into the lesson to see what they learned from that video and from the morning work. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to be going into a lesson that I did, an in-class flipped lesson that I did in math, but I'm going to record this and include it in the math flip portion of this website. So if you go up to the website and you look at the bars at the top,